Hello, here's another landscape or a riverscape with some reflections and trees and stuff like that. So if you enjoy landscapes, keep watching. I'm gonna do a graphite pencil sketch and the line of the water will be somewhere around here, bending slightly towards the right side. And then I'm gonna make some suggestions where the trees will be. And after that, I'm going to do the sky. I've already done a similar drawing of a river, but those were mostly coniferous trees. Here we'll have slightly different types of trees and slightly different reflections and clouds and some other stuff. So again, I use my graphite pencil to shade the sky, create a little bit of value, so that I can later use erasers to create clouds. I'm blending that with a tissue and with Q-tips. If I find that it's not enough value to achieve contrast with the clouds, I may add a little bit more. So now I grabbed a kneaded eraser, and you can see that I'm dabbing a little bit where I think that the clouds are going to be, trying to lift up some of that graphite, and then I use a pencil eraser to further define the edges, the upper edges of those clouds. I wasn't really happy here with the amount of contrast, so I decided to add a little more value to the background. I'm going to spoil the cloud a little bit, but that's okay because I can use my pencil eraser again and clean up the edges. So that they stand out a little bit more against the sky. So I'm going to have a couple of these larger clouds in the middle and a couple of smaller ones here and there. And those will also be reflected in the water. So I'm going to have to vary the amount of value in the water. So I mostly positioned all the clouds where I want them. And I'm just trying to refine their shape a little bit and trying to make them look a little more realistic. Now, onto these trees. I'm using woodless charcoal pencils, and I'm also going to make a few suggestions of branches, and then I'm going to do the scribbling that I normally use to produce something that looks like leaves and canopies of the trees. This part requires a little bit of patience, but it actually doesn't take that long. All you have to do is just keep scribbling and make sure that you don't create longer lines which may ruin the appearance of those trees. So I want it to look like thick foliage, and as I shade I will break it into segments of darker and lighter value. The lower portion of those trees will be here. That'll be a darker area near the water. And you can see that I'm starting to put down some of these darker areas which will be separating these segments and individual trees, because there's a whole bunch of trees there. They're kind of bunched up. Just a whole bunch of canopies and some bushes in front, whatever. So when I go over all of that, I'm going to start blending. And if you're wondering why I'm so careful with this part of the process before I actually start blending, that's because some of that texture will still be left even when you blend it. So you have to keep that in mind. But the blending with the Q-tip, with the Tortillion, which is what I'm doing now, will soften a lot of that texture so that it doesn't look like noise, so it doesn't look grainy. And it will just improve the appearance of the foliage, make it look more dense. So I'm softening everything up, and at the same time I'm going over certain areas with a little bit more pressure and using a little less pressure in other areas, because I want some of these areas to be darker and others to be lighter, and I want to create some kind of structure. I want some shapes to be visible. I can occasionally go over it with a brush very lightly when I want to cover some of the white areas or white dots that I missed, because I don't want to leave anything exactly white. So even these lighter portions or highlights on the foliage need to have a certain amount of value. I've sharpened my pencil eraser, and now I'm starting to work on these highlights. And what I call highlights here when I'm drawing trees are actually leaves or clusters of leaves that are simply getting more light and are therefore a lot lighter than the rest of the foliage. So they kind of stand out. This too requires a little bit of patience till I go over all of these segments and define their upper edges. But the good thing about drawing landscapes is that you can approach it in a more relaxed, loose manner, because you don't have to worry about your reference photo that much. All you have to do is just draw something that looks like leaves, that looks like trees. So now I'm using a brush to soften some of these textures even more. And now I'm going to be moving on to the middle and the right side of that tree line. I am using even less pressure here with my charcoal pencil, because I am going to make this portion a little bit lighter. So I'm going to make it look like the area to the left is getting less light and is more in the shade, and the area in the middle is getting more light. And I'm gonna use my charcoal pencil to draw these darker areas like on the left side as well, to break that into segments, and then basically repeat the same process, except here on the right side I'm going to leave an area of land below these trees, which will be covered with grass, and on the left the trees are just above water, so there's not much of the shore visible, or the bank, whatever it is. So you can see that I left this middle portion of the trees a little bit lighter and a little bit softer too, with a little less contrast. And then moving on to the right side, I'm going to have some more darker values there. You can see that the upper portion of my drawing is starting to look pretty realistic, with the sky and the trees and everything. So all I have to do is not mess it up too much with the water, and let's hope I won't. Again, adding some of these darker areas and blending everything. The motion that I'm using, or the stroke that I'm using with my tortillions, is mostly a circular motion, because I'm trying to avoid lines that would create some kind of a pattern and would make these trees look artificial and weird. So I'm using a circular motion both with my pencils and my tortillions, and with the brushes as well. That way everything's gonna look more natural, more organic. Now I have to move on to the water. And I grabbed a piece of vine charcoal and just covered the whole area with it, and then blended it with a tissue, and did that a couple more times until I was happy with the amount of value, because I didn't want it to be too light, because I need to draw the reflections of these clouds, so the clouds have to stand out here as well, so I need to have enough value. Now I started grabbing a little bit of charcoal dust here and leaving it on the paper so that I can smudge it, spread it around to create these darker reflections of those trees on the left and the right. And I'm using a soft brush to spread that around. So I just need to make this area darker so that it sort of matches what we see above the horizon or above the surface of the water. The idea is to make the reflection similar to what's above the water, but it doesn't have to be perfect for two reasons. First, because I really can't be bothered to try to make it look perfect, and second, because the water is moving and it has some ripples and it's impossible for the reflection to look exactly like the image above. So all I have to do in order to make this look realistic is add in darker and lighter areas so that they roughly match what's above the water. That helps you sell it in a way, make it look like a real reflection to the viewer. So just try to create a similar shape and then just look for these darker areas. Just look for these darker areas on the tree line above and try to position those in my reflection as well here and there, and hopefully it'll be enough to trick the eye that it's an actual reflection. I'm using a pencil eraser to add in some of the highlights, some of these ripples, as well as some of the lighter areas in my reflection. Hopefully when I'm done it will look more like the surface of the water. I'm adding some more charcoal where needed and then blending it with a tortillon as well as with the brushes. And I'm breaking the reflection into these horizontal bits because of the movement of the water. And now I need to draw the clouds here in the middle, or the reflections of the clouds in the middle. So I'm trying to create lighter areas in that portion of my drawing. These again don't have to match the clouds above exactly, for the same reasons I mentioned previously. I just have to position them so that they roughly look like a mirror of the image above. Here I added a few of these lighter suggestions of branches to make these trees a little more interesting, and I did the same thing here on the right. And now I'm using vine charcoal to create these reflections on the right side as well. Covering a pretty large area very quickly and then blending it with a brush, and then later I'm going to use a tortillon and a pencil eraser to pull some detail. Again, doing the same thing, trying to match these darker areas so that the reflection looks like a mirror image. more or less. But not worrying too much about precision, because that wouldn't be fun. So I'm adding some of these details with the tortillon because I don't want to use a charcoal pencil. It will be too dark and produce too much texture, so I need something a little bit softer. And I'm also planning to add something in the foreground here, in the lower right corner, some grass, just to make the scene a little more interesting. And now I'm trying to complete this area here, where I'm just going to add a little bit of low grass in front of these trees, and that too has to have its reflection, so that's going to be this lighter area in the right side of the water. So I'm just trying to deal with this area here, even though I wasn't really sure what to do with it. Just trying to suggest that there is an area of grass there near the water. And I'm going back in with a pencil eraser to make some of these areas lighter and to make the reflection match that area a little bit more. And a few more of these darker details. Here you can see that I already signed my drawing, but I didn't really want to finish it there because I felt like I needed a little bit more grass, taller grass to the right. I'm not sure if that was a great idea, but there you have it. And this is the finished drawing. I hope you enjoyed this riverscape. And if you like landscapes, you should check out my other videos. I have a few more landscapes. Bye for now.